In the shadowed corridors of power, where ambition meets ruthless calculation, there exists a breed of men who understand a fundamental truth that escapes the masses: words are wind, but actions carve empires from stone. These are not the men who thunder from podiums or seek validation through endless discourse. They are the silent architects of destiny, the ones who move while others debate, who strike while others deliberate, and who understand that in the grand theater of human ambition, the audience remembers not what was promised, but what was delivered. The dangerous man, dangerous not in the crude sense of physical violence, but dangerous to the established order, dangerous to complacency, dangerous to mediocrity, operates by principles that would make the comfortable masses recoil. He understands that the world belongs not to the loudest voice, but to the most decisive hand. He knows that fortune favors not the eloquent, but the bold. Most crucially, he recognizes that his greatest enemy is not the external opposition he faces, but the weakness within himself that would counsel hesitation, seek approval, or crave the warm embrace of popular opinion. The transformation from ordinary man to dangerous man begins with a brutal act of self-examination, a merciless inventory of one's own limitations, fears, and dependencies. It is an autopsy performed on the living, dissecting every excuse, every rationalization, every comfortable lie that has kept one tethered to mediocrity. The weak self must be identified with surgical precision before it can be destroyed with absolute finality. Consider the nature of weakness as it manifests in the modern man. It whispers of safety in conformity, of wisdom in delay, of virtue in seeking consensus. It convinces him that his hesitation is prudence, his fear is wisdom, his need for approval is humility. The weak self is the voice that says tomorrow when the moment demands now, that says perhaps when destiny requires yes or no. It is the internal saboteur that has prevented more men from greatness than all external enemies combined. The dangerous man recognizes this internal enemy and wages war against it with the same intensity that Caesar brought to Gaul. He understands that this is not a battle to be won once, but a campaign that requires constant vigilance. Every day, in small moments and great crises alike, the choice presents itself: will he listen to the counsel of his weak self, or will he act from a place of strength, purpose, and calculated risk? Marcus was such a man, though he had not always been. In his earlier years, he had been plagued by the same demons that haunt most: the desire to be liked, the fear of failure, the paralysis that comes from seeing too many angles to every situation. He worked in the financial district of a major city, surrounded by men who mistook activity for action, who confused being busy with being effective. They filled their days with meetings about meetings, with elaborate presentations that led to committees that would form subcommittees to study the feasibility of possibly considering a course of action. Marcus watched this theater of inefficiency for 3 years before he understood the game being played. These men were not seeking results, they were seeking protection. By spreading responsibility across multiple people and processes, by ensuring that every decision had enough fingerprints on it that blame could never be assigned to any one person, they had created a system where failure was diffuse and, therefore, painless. It was a comfortable arrangement for comfortable men, but Marcus began to realize that comfort was the enemy of excellence. The first principle of dangerous operation is the willingness to act on incomplete information. While others demand certainty, the dangerous man understands that certainty is a luxury that history rarely affords to those who shape it. He learns to read patterns rather than wait for proof, to trust his instincts rather than rely on consensus, to move when he has enough information to make an informed decision rather than wait until he has enough information to make a perfect one. Marcus demonstrated this principle when his company was paralyzed by indecision regarding a potential acquisition. The target company was struggling, its stock price depressed, but Marcus could see the underlying value that others missed. While his colleagues scheduled more due diligence meetings and requested additional market research, Marcus quietly began building relationships with key stakeholders in the target company. He did not seek permission for these meetings, nor did he announce his intentions. He simply acted. When the formal acquisition talks finally began, Marcus had already mapped the political landscape, identified the key decision-makers, and understood their motivations. While his colleagues were still trying to interpret financial statements, Marcus was having dinner with the CEO's brother-in-law, learning about the family dynamics that would ultimately drive the negotiation. When the deal was announced 6 months later, with Marcus as the lead negotiator and primary architect, his colleagues marveled at his luck in being in the right place at the right time. Luck, however, had nothing to do with it. Marcus had created his own opportunity through decisive action while others were still debating whether opportunity existed. This is the second principle of dangerous operation, the creation of circumstance rather than the mere response to it. Ordinary men react to events, dangerous men create the events to which others react. The dangerous man understands that in any complex situation, there are multiple games being played simultaneously. There is the obvious game, the one that everyone can see and most people focus on. There is the political game, the maneuvering for position, influence, and favor. There is the economic game, the competition for resources and opportunities. And there is the deeper game, the contest of wills, the battle of narratives, the struggle to define what victory means and who gets to claim it. While ordinary men focus on one game at a time, the dangerous man plays them all simultaneously. He understands that winning the obvious game while losing the political game is often a Pyrrhic victory. He knows that economic success without narrative control can be temporary and fragile. Most importantly, he recognizes that the deepest game, the contest of wills, often determines the outcome of all the others. Marcus's approach to the acquisition demonstrated this multi-dimensional thinking. On the surface, he was negotiating price, terms, and conditions. Politically, he was building alliances with board members and key stakeholders. Economically, he was structuring the deal to maximize value for both companies. But, at the deepest level, he was engaged in a contest of wills with the target company's founder, a proud man who had built the company from nothing and was reluctant to see it absorbed by a larger entity. Rather than approach this as a purely financial transaction, Marcus understood that he was dealing with a man's legacy, his identity, his life's work. He spent time learning about the founder's history, his values, his vision for what the company could become. Instead of positioning the acquisition as a takeover, Marcus framed it as a partnership that would allow the founder's vision to be realized on a larger scale. He painted a picture of the founder not as someone surrendering his life's work, but as someone elevating it to its next evolutionary stage. This narrative strategy proved decisive. When competing offers emerged, some with better financial terms, the founder chose Marcus's proposal because it offered something more valuable than money. It offered meaning. The founder could tell himself, his family, and his employees that he had not sold out, but had instead found the perfect partner to carry his vision forward. The third principle of dangerous operation is the mastery of timing. The dangerous man does not simply act decisively, he acts at the optimal moment. He understands that the same action can produce vastly different results depending on when it is taken. A truth spoken too early falls on deaf ears, spoken too late, it lacks relevance. A move made too soon meets unnecessary resistance, made too late, it meets a situation already solidified by others' actions. Timing mastery requires patience, but it is not the passive patience of those who wait for permission or for perfect conditions. It is the active patience of the hunter, who remains motionless not out of indecision but out of calculation, who strikes not when he feels ready but when his prey is most vulnerable. The dangerous man learns to read the rhythms of human nature, the cycles of attention and distraction, the patterns of resistance and opportunity. Marcus exhibited this timing mastery throughout the acquisition process. He had identified the optimal moment to make his move months before he acted, watching for the specific confluence of circumstances that would create maximum leverage. The target company's quarterly earnings would be announced in 6 weeks, and Marcus knew they would be disappointing. The founder was dealing with personal health issues that were not public knowledge but were affecting his decision-making speed. A major competitor was distracted by their own internal reorganization and would not be in a position to make a competing offer for at least 3 months. Marcus waited until 2 weeks before the earnings announcement to make his initial approach. The timing was precise, late enough that the founder would be feeling pressure about the upcoming disappointing numbers, but early enough that Marcus could position himself as a solution rather than an opportunist feeding on weakness. The founder's health concerns made him more receptive to the idea of partnership rather than continued solo leadership, while the competitor's distraction meant Marcus had a clear field for negotiation. When Marcus finally moved, it appeared to others as if he had simply gotten lucky with his timing. In reality, he had been tracking multiple variables for months, waiting for them to align in a configuration that would maximize his probability of success. This is the difference between the dangerous man and the merely ambitious. The ambitious man acts when he feels ready, while the dangerous man acts when the world is ready for his action. The fourth principle of dangerous operation is the cultivation of strategic relationships. The dangerous man understands that no significant achievement is accomplished in isolation. However, his approach to relationship building differs fundamentally from the networking of ordinary men. Where others seek to be liked or to create superficial connections for potential future benefit, the dangerous man builds relationships based on mutual value creation and complementary strengths. He does not network, he architects alliances. He does not seek mentors, he identifies those whose success is enhanced by his own advancement. He does not chase influential people for their own sake, he becomes someone that influential people want to be associated with. This requires a fundamental shift in perspective from seeking value to creating value, from asking what others can do for him to demonstrating what he can do for others. Marcus understood this principle intuitively. Rather than trying to impress senior executives with his credentials or achievements, he made himself useful to them. When the chief financial officer was struggling with a complex valuation model, Marcus didn't volunteer his opinion, he stayed late for 3 nights running, building a more elegant solution and presenting it without fanfare the following Monday. When the head of corporate development mentioned in passing her frustration with finding reliable market intelligence, Marcus began forwarding carefully curated industry insights, not weekly or even monthly, but precisely when they would be most valuable. These were not grand gestures designed to garner attention. They were subtle demonstrations of value that accumulated over time, creating a reservoir of goodwill that could be drawn upon when needed. When the acquisition opportunity emerged, Marcus didn't need to convince anyone of his capabilities, he had already established them through consistent demonstration of judgment and usefulness. The dangerous man also understands the importance of creating dependency without creating resentment. He makes himself indispensable not by hoarding information or creating artificial scarcities, but by becoming the person others turn to when they need things done correctly and quickly. He builds his reputation not on what he knows, but on what he delivers. This approach to relationship building extends beyond professional contexts. The dangerous man recognizes that power and influence exist in multiple spheres, and that today's junior associate may be tomorrow's decision-maker. He treats everyone with the respect due to a potential future ally, not because he is naturally kind, but because he understands that the world has a way of redistributing power in unexpected ways. Marcus applied this principle even in seemingly insignificant interactions. He remembered names, asked about personal interests, and followed up on previous conversations. When the security guard mentioned his son's graduation, Marcus remembered to ask about it 3 weeks later. When the executive assistant mentioned her frustration with the building's catering service, Marcus quietly arranged for her to meet a contact at a superior provider. These small acts of attention and consideration created a network of goodwill that proved invaluable when he needed information, access, or simple cooperation. The fifth principle of dangerous operation is the strategic use of information. Information is power only when it is actionable, exclusive, or perfectly timed. The dangerous man does not seek to know everything, he seeks to know the right things at the right time and to know them before others do. He understands that in the modern world, information is abundant but insight is rare. His advantage lies not in accessing data, but in interpreting patterns and implications that others miss. The dangerous man also understands that information has different values in different contexts. The same piece of information might be worthless to one person and invaluable to another. He learns to think not just about what information means, but about who would value it most and when they would value it most. This allows him to build relationships and create obligations by being the person who provides valuable information to those who need it. Marcus demonstrated this principle throughout his career, but never more effectively than during the acquisition negotiations. He had cultivated sources throughout the industry, former colleagues, suppliers, customers, even competitors, who provided him with insights that never appeared in official reports or public statements. He knew about the target company's upcoming product delays, their difficulties with a key supplier, and their CEO's private concerns about market saturation. More importantly, Marcus understood how to use this information strategically. He did not reveal everything he knew in an attempt to demonstrate his superior intelligence. Instead, he deployed information precisely when it would have maximum impact. When the target company's negotiators claimed that their upcoming product launch would significantly increase the company's value, Marcus casually mentioned industry rumors about similar products facing regulatory delays. He didn't claim to have specific knowledge about their product, but his comment introduced enough doubt to weaken their negotiating position. This strategic information deployment served multiple purposes. It demonstrated Marcus's deep industry knowledge without revealing his sources or the full extent of his intelligence network. It subtly shifted the negotiation dynamics by introducing uncertainty where the other side had expected confidence. Most importantly, it established Marcus as someone who understood the industry at a level that demanded respect and caution. The dangerous man also understands the value of strategic ignorance. There are times when claiming not to know something is more powerful than demonstrating knowledge. There are situations where asking questions is more effective than providing answers. There are moments when appearing slightly naive can lower others' defenses and encourage them to reveal more than they intended. Marcus used this technique when meeting with the target company's founder. Despite his extensive research, he asked basic questions about the company's history and the founder's vision. This approach served several purposes. It allowed the founder to tell his story in his own words, revealing his emotional attachments and psychological motivations. It made the founder feel respected and important, and it created opportunities for the founder to share information he might not have volunteered if he thought Marcus already knew it. The strategic use of information extends beyond business negotiations to all areas of life where the dangerous man operates. He understands that knowledge shared indiscriminately loses its power, while knowledge shared selectively creates obligations and relationships. He learns not just what to know, but what to reveal, when to reveal it, and to whom. This brings us to the sixth principle of dangerous operation, the management of perception and reputation. The dangerous man understands that reality and perception are both important, but they operate according to different rules. Reality is what actually happens, perception is what people believe happens. While the dangerous man never ignores reality, he also never ignores the fact that people make decisions based on their perceptions of reality, not reality itself. The management of perception requires a sophisticated understanding of human psychology and group dynamics. People form impressions quickly and change them slowly. They pay more attention to what confirms their existing beliefs than to what challenges them. They are more influenced by stories than by statistics, more moved by emotion than by logic, more convinced by what they discover themselves than by what they are told directly. The dangerous man learns to work within these psychological realities rather than fighting against them. He understands that sometimes the most effective way to convince someone of a truth is to let them discover it themselves. He knows that sometimes the best way to achieve an objective is to make others believe it was their idea. He recognizes that sometimes the most powerful position is to be seen as reluctantly accepting responsibility rather than eagerly seeking it. Marcus mastered this principle through careful observation of how successful people managed their reputations. He noticed that those who constantly promoted their own achievements were often viewed with suspicion, while those whose achievements were promoted by others were viewed with admiration. He observed that executives who always had ready answers were sometimes seen as arrogant, while those who asked thoughtful questions were seen as wise. Based on these observations, Marcus developed his own approach to reputation management. Rather than promoting his successes directly, he focused on creating situations where others would naturally want to share credit with him or acknowledge his contributions. When the acquisition was successful, Marcus made sure that senior executives felt they had played crucial roles in the victory. He publicly credited the CFO's analytical insights, the legal team's negotiation skills, and the CEO's strategic vision, while quietly ensuring that his own role was understood by those who mattered most. This approach accomplished several objectives simultaneously. It made Marcus's colleagues more likely to want to work with him on future projects, since they knew he would ensure they received appropriate recognition. It demonstrated his sophistication and team-oriented approach to senior leadership. Most importantly, it created a network of people who had reason to speak positively about Marcus's contributions, since doing so also reflected well on their own participation in the project. The dangerous man also understands that reputation must be actively managed over time. A single success can elevate a reputation, but a single failure can destroy it.
He therefore builds redundancy into his reputation, ensuring that it rests on multiple achievements across different areas.
He also learns to manage expectations carefully, understanding that exceeding moderate expectations is often more powerful than meeting high ones. Marcus applied this understanding throughout his career progression. Rather than seeking the most visible assignments that would provide maximum exposure, he chose projects where he could deliver exceptional results relative to expectations. He volunteered for challenging assignments that others avoided, not because they were high profile, but because success would be particularly notable given the difficulty involved. This strategy proved especially valuable during economic downturns or organizational restructuring, when many high performers found themselves vulnerable despite their track records. Marcus had built a reputation for delivering results under difficult circumstances, making him indispensable when circumstances became difficult for everyone.
The seventh principle of dangerous operation is the cultivation of optionality.
The dangerous man understands that in a complex and rapidly changing world, the ability to adapt quickly is often more valuable than any specific skill or position. He therefore structures his life and career to maintain multiple options, avoiding dependencies that could trap him in unfavorable situations. Optionality requires both strategic thinking and tactical execution.
Strategically, it means building skills, relationships, and resources that are transferable across different contexts. It means avoiding specialization that is too narrow or dependency that is too complete.
It means maintaining financial, professional, and personal flexibility that allows for rapid pivoting when circumstances change.
Tactically, optionality requires the discipline to resist attractive opportunities that would close off other possibilities.
It means sometimes accepting smaller immediate gains to preserve larger future options. It means being willing to invest time and energy in building capabilities that may never be used, because their value lies in the freedom they provide rather than in any specific application. Marcus understood this principle intuitively, perhaps because he had seen too many talented people become trapped in golden cages of their own making. He watched colleagues accept positions with impressive titles and substantial compensation, only to discover that their specialized expertise made them nearly impossible to place elsewhere when their companies restructured or their industries declined. To maintain optionality, Marcus made several counterintuitive choices throughout his career. He turned down 2 promotions that would have significantly increased his compensation but would have specialized him in areas with limited transferability. He invested substantial time in building relationships outside his immediate industry, maintaining connections in technology, government, and academia even though they provided no immediate benefit.
He also maintained financial discipline that allowed him to take risks or accept temporary income reductions if attractive opportunities emerged.
This commitment to optionality proved decisive when Marcus's company was acquired by a larger competitor. Many of his colleagues found themselves redundant or relegated to diminished roles in the merged organization. Marcus, however, had been quietly exploring other opportunities for months before the acquisition was announced. When the merger was completed, he was able to choose between 3 attractive positions at different companies, ultimately selecting the opportunity that offered the best combination of growth potential and strategic learning. The 8th principle of dangerous operation is the mastery of emotional regulation. The dangerous man understands that emotions are powerful forces that can either drive exceptional performance or create devastating blindness. He learns not to suppress his emotions, but to channel them effectively. He recognizes that anger can fuel determination, that fear can sharpen focus, that excitement can generate energy, but that any emotion left unmanaged can lead to poor decisions. Emotional mastery requires both self-awareness and disciplined practice. The dangerous man learns to recognize his emotional patterns, understanding which situations trigger which responses and how those responses affect his thinking and behavior. He develops techniques for maintaining clarity and perspective during emotionally charged situations. Most importantly, he learns to use emotions as information rather than allowing them to dictate his actions. Marcus developed his emotional regulation skills through a combination of formal study and practical experience. He read extensively about decision-making under pressure, studying how successful leaders maintained their effectiveness during crises. He also sought out challenging situations that would test his emotional control, viewing them as training opportunities rather than mere obstacles. During the acquisition negotiations, Marcus faced several situations that tested his emotional regulation skills. When the target company's founder made what Marcus perceived as an unfair personal attack during a tense moment in the negotiations, Marcus felt his anger rising. Rather than responding immediately, he excused himself briefly, using the time to process his emotional response and consider his strategic options. When he returned to the negotiation table, Marcus addressed the founder's concern directly but without defensiveness or counterattack. He acknowledged the legitimate business concern underlying the personal criticism and proposed a specific modification to the deal structure that addressed the founder's worry. This response not only diffused the tension but actually strengthened Marcus's negotiating position by demonstrating his professionalism and flexibility. This incident illustrated several aspects of emotional mastery. Marcus recognized his emotional response without being controlled by it. He gave himself time to process his reaction rather than feeling compelled to respond immediately. He separated the personal element of the attack from the business concern it contained. Most importantly, he used the emotional information to understand something important about the other party's psychological state and concerns. The dangerous man also learns to read and influence the emotional states of others. He understands that people make decisions based on how they feel as much as on what they think. He learns to create emotional states that support his objectives while avoiding emotional states that would create resistance or opposition. Marcus demonstrated this skill throughout the acquisition process. He paid careful attention to the emotional dynamics of every meeting, adjusting his approach based on the mood and energy of the participants. When he sensed that the target company's team was feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of the deal structure, he would suggest breaking for lunch or scheduling a follow-up meeting, giving everyone time to process the information without feeling pressured. When he detected that the founder was feeling nostalgic about the company's history, Marcus would ask questions that allowed the founder to share meaningful stories about the company's development. This not only provided Marcus with valuable insights about the company's culture and values, but also created positive emotional associations with the negotiation process itself. The ninth principle of dangerous operation is the development of systems thinking. The dangerous man understands that most significant challenges are systemic rather than isolated problems. He learns to see patterns, connections, and feedback loops that others miss. He recognizes that addressing symptoms while ignoring underlying systems often creates larger problems than it solves. Systems thinking requires the ability to operate at multiple levels of analysis simultaneously. The dangerous man can zoom in to understand specific details and zoom out to see larger patterns. He can think in terms of immediate causes and long-term consequences. He can consider not just what he wants to achieve, but how achieving it will affect other parts of the system he operates within. This perspective allows the dangerous man to identify leverage points, places where small actions can produce large results because they address fundamental system dynamics rather than surface-level symptoms. It also helps him anticipate unintended consequences and design solutions that are robust across different scenarios. Marcus applied systems thinking throughout his approach to the acquisition. Rather than focusing solely on the financial aspects of the deal, he considered how the acquisition would affect the culture of both organizations, the career paths of key employees, the relationships with customers and suppliers, and the competitive dynamics of the industry. This comprehensive perspective allowed Marcus to identify several potential problems before they became serious obstacles. He realized that the target company's informal, entrepreneurial culture might clash with his company's more structured, process-oriented approach. Rather than assuming this would resolve itself naturally, Marcus worked with the human resources teams of both companies to develop integration plans that preserved the best aspects of both cultures while minimizing friction. He also recognized that several key employees at the target company had personal relationships with major customers that could be threatened by the acquisition. Instead of relying on standard retention bonuses, Marcus worked to design new roles that would actually enhance these employees' relationships with their customers while providing them with additional career development opportunities within the larger organization. The systems perspective also helped Marcus anticipate competitive responses to the acquisition. He realized that combining the two companies would create a new competitive threat that might prompt other industry players to form their own alliances or make their own acquisitions. Rather than simply reacting to these moves when they occurred, Marcus began building relationships with potential acquisition targets before competitors became aware of their strategic value. This proactive approach to systems thinking became one of Marcus's signature capabilities. While his colleagues were often surprised by new developments in their industry, Marcus had usually anticipated them months earlier and had already positioned himself to take advantage of the changes or minimize their negative impacts.
The 10th principle of dangerous operation is the pursuit of compound leverage.
The dangerous man understands that the most powerful achievements come not from single actions, no matter how well executed, but from series of actions that build upon each other to create exponential rather than linear results. He thinks in terms of compound interest, network effects, and positive feedback loops.
Compound leverage requires patience and strategic thinking.
It means making investments that may not pay off immediately but that create platforms for future success. It means building capabilities that can be applied across multiple domains rather than focusing narrowly on immediate objectives. It means creating value that attracts additional opportunities and resources. Marcus's entire career trajectory illustrated the power of compound leverage. Each success created new opportunities, each relationship opened doors to additional relationships, each skill enhanced his ability to develop other skills. The acquisition that made his reputation was not an isolated achievement but the culmination of years of systematic investment in capabilities, relationships, and positioning. The negotiation skills Marcus developed during the acquisition served him well in subsequent roles. The relationships he built during the process led to board positions, consulting opportunities, and investment partnerships. The reputation he established attracted talented people who wanted to work with him, creating a positive feedback loop where his access to top talent enhanced his ability to deliver exceptional results, which further enhanced his reputation and access to talent. This compound effect accelerated over time. Marcus's second major deal took half as long to complete as his first, not because the second deal was simpler, but because he could leverage relationships, insights, and systems he had developed during the first deal. His third deal opened up international opportunities that he could not have accessed earlier in his career. His fourth deal led to an invitation to join a private equity firm as a partner, providing him with both capital and a platform for even larger transactions. The dangerous man understands that compound leverage extends beyond professional achievements to all areas of life.
Physical fitness compounds over time, with early investments in health paying dividends for decades.
Intellectual development compounds, with each new area of learning enhancing the ability to master additional areas. Social capital compounds, with each meaningful relationship increasing the potential for future valuable connections.
Marcus applied this understanding systematically.
He invested time in physical fitness not just for immediate health benefits, but because he understood that energy and stamina would be crucial for sustaining high performance over decades. He studied subjects outside his immediate professional needs, history, psychology, technology, because he recognized that diverse knowledge would enhance his ability to see patterns and opportunities that others missed. He also invested significant time and resources in developing others, particularly younger professionals who showed exceptional potential. This was not simply altruism. Marcus understood that people he helped develop would remember his contribution to their success and would be inclined to reciprocate when they achieved positions of influence. Over time, this created an informal network of accomplished professionals who considered Marcus a mentor and ally. As we reach the culmination of understanding how dangerous men operate, it becomes clear that their power lies not in any single technique or principle, but in the systematic application of a comprehensive philosophy of action and self-development. The dangerous man has destroyed his weak self not through a single dramatic transformation, but through the daily discipline of choosing strength over comfort, action over deliberation, and purpose over popularity. The weak self dies hard because it is composed not of a single identifiable enemy, but of 1,000 small compromises, excuses, and deferrals. It regenerates constantly, whispering new justifications for delay, new reasons for caution, new arguments for seeking approval before acting. The dangerous man must therefore be vigilant in his self-examination, ruthless in his honesty about his own motivations, and relentless in his commitment to growth. Marcus's transformation into a truly dangerous man was not completed with the success of his first major acquisition. That success merely proved to him that the principles he had been developing actually worked. The real test came in the years that followed, when he faced the temptation to rest on his achievements, to become comfortable with his reputation, to allow success to breed complacency. Instead, Marcus used each success as a platform for greater challenges. When headhunters approached him with offers to join prestigious firms in comfortable senior positions, he chose instead to start his own investment firm. When that firm became successful, he expanded into international markets rather than simply scaling domestically. When those expansions succeeded, he began taking on turnaround situations that others considered hopeless. Each escalation required Marcus to develop new capabilities and overcome new forms of his weak self. The weak self that had once counseled against taking risks now whispered that he should be satisfied with his current level of success. The weak self that had once sought approval now suggested that he should focus on maintaining his reputation rather than risking it on uncertain ventures. The weak self that had once feared failure now warned that his past successes made future failures more costly and embarrassing. Marcus recognized these voices for what they were, new manifestations of the same fundamental weakness that had once kept him trapped in corporate middle management. He applied the same ruthless analysis to these sophisticated forms of weakness that he had once applied to their cruder predecessors. He reminded himself that the purpose of success was not comfort but capability, the ability to take on greater challenges and create larger impacts. The dangerous man also understands that his development never ends. The world changes, new challenges emerge, and the capabilities that brought success in one era may be insufficient for the next. He therefore commits not just to achieving specific goals, but to continuous evolution of his abilities, perspectives, and approaches. Marcus exemplified this commitment to continuous development well into his 50s. When digital technology began transforming the investment industry, Marcus did not delegate understanding of these changes to younger team members. Instead, he immersed himself in learning about artificial intelligence, blockchain technology, and data analytics. He attended conferences, took courses, and sought out mentors who could help him understand how these technologies would reshape his industry. This commitment to continuous learning required Marcus to overcome yet another form of his weak self, the ego-driven resistance to being a beginner again. At a stage in his career when he was widely recognized as an expert, Marcus had to accept the humility of not understanding new technologies that recent graduates grasped intuitively. He had to ask basic questions, make fundamental mistakes, and endure the temporary discomfort of incompetence. However, Marcus understood that the alternative to this discomfort was irrelevance. He recognized that the dangerous man must be willing to repeatedly destroy not just his weak self, but also his past self, the previous version of himself that was adapted to previous circumstances. The ability to reinvent oneself while maintaining core principles and capabilities is perhaps the ultimate expression of dangerous operation. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others because external destruction requires internal collaboration. The enemy who seeks to defeat the dangerous man must find some weakness to exploit, some fear to activate, some dependency to threaten. If the dangerous man has systematically identified and eliminated these vulnerabilities within himself, he becomes effectively immune to external manipulation or coercion. This does not mean the dangerous man becomes invulnerable to all external forces. Natural disasters, economic collapse, or political upheaval can affect anyone. However, the dangerous man is destroyed by circumstances, not by enemies. His destruction, if it comes, results from forces beyond human control rather than from human opposition exploiting internal weakness. Marcus understood this principle viscerally after decades of operating in competitive environments where others actively sought to undermine his success. He had been attacked by competitors, betrayed by colleagues, and opposed by regulatory authorities. In each case, he had survived and ultimately prevailed not because he was immune to their actions, but because he had eliminated the internal weaknesses that their actions were designed to exploit. When competitors spread rumors about his business practices, Marcus was unaffected because his reputation was based on documented results rather than image management. When colleagues attempted to take credit for his achievements, Marcus was unconcerned because his value was based on his ability to deliver future results rather than recognition for past ones. When regulatory authorities investigated his operations, Marcus was prepared because he had always maintained standards higher than legal requirements. The dangerous man's immunity to destruction by others extends beyond professional contexts to all areas of his life. Personal relationships cannot be weaponized against him because he does not depend on others for his sense of identity or self-worth.
Financial pressures cannot control him because he has maintained optionality and avoided unsustainable dependencies. Social ostracism cannot motivate him because he derives his satisfaction from achievement rather than approval.
This independence, however, does not make the dangerous man antisocial or isolated. On the contrary, his freedom from desperate need for others often makes him more attractive as a partner, colleague, or friend. People are drawn to those who want their company but do not need their validation. The dangerous man can offer genuine value in relationships because he is not primarily seeking to extract value for his own psychological needs.
Marcus's personal relationships reflected this dynamic.
His marriage was strong not because he needed his wife's approval, but because he chose to build a life with someone whose values and goals complemented his own. His friendships were deep not because he was desperate for social connection, but because he could offer loyalty, support, and interesting companionship without ulterior motives. His professional relationships were productive not because he needed others' cooperation, but because he could create mutual value while maintaining his independence. The paradox of dangerous operation is that the man who needs least from others often receives most from them. Because he is not driven by desperate need, he can be selective in his relationships, choosing quality over quantity. Because he offers value without expectation of specific returns, others are motivated to reciprocate generously. Because he maintains his options, others compete for his attention and commitment. This dynamic creates a positive feedback loop where independence breeds attractiveness, which creates opportunities, which enhance capabilities, which increase independence. The dangerous man becomes progressively more powerful not through aggressive self-promotion, but through the systematic elimination of weakness and the disciplined pursuit of excellence. However, the path of dangerous operation is not without its costs and challenges.
The constant self-examination required to identify and eliminate weakness can be psychologically demanding. The discipline required to choose difficult right action over comfortable wrong action requires ongoing effort. The isolation that sometimes comes with independence can be personally challenging, even when it is strategically necessary. Marcus experienced all of these difficulties during his transformation. The early years of his development were particularly challenging as he learned to operate without the comfortable certainties that had previously guided his decisions. He had to learn to trust his own judgment when conventional wisdom suggested different approaches. He had to accept responsibility for outcomes without being able to blame circumstances or other people when things went wrong. The social costs were also significant. Some of Marcus's former colleagues resented his success and attributed it to luck, politics, or unethical behavior rather than acknowledging the discipline and capability it actually reflected. Some friends found his increasing focus and ambition threatening to their own comfort with mediocrity. Some family members worried that his pursuit of excellence was really a form of workaholism or emotional dysfunction. Marcus learned to accept these social costs as inevitable consequences of choosing an uncommon path. He understood that most people prefer to believe that exceptional success is due to factors beyond individual control because this belief protects them from confronting their own choices and limitations. He recognized that his example could be threatening to those who had chosen comfort over growth, because it demonstrated that alternatives were possible. Rather than attempting to justify his choices to those who would never understand them, Marcus focused on surrounding himself with people who shared his commitment to excellence or who at least respected it in others. He learned to accept loneliness as a temporary price for independence and to find satisfaction in achievement rather than approval. The dangerous man must also navigate the ethical dimensions of his capabilities. Power, by its nature, creates the potential for both positive and negative impact. The man who has eliminated his internal weaknesses and developed formidable capabilities bears responsibility for how those capabilities are used. Marcus grappled with these ethical questions throughout his career. The same skills that allowed him to negotiate advantageous business deals could potentially be used to manipulate others unfairly. The same independence that protected him from external coercion could lead to callous disregard for others' legitimate needs. The same systematic thinking that revealed leverage points for positive change could also identify vulnerabilities to exploit for selfish gain. Marcus resolved these ethical tensions by developing a clear personal code that guided his use of power. He committed to creating value rather than merely extracting it, to building rather than destroying, to empowering others rather than diminishing them. He understood that true strength was demonstrated not by the ability to harm others, but by the discipline to refrain from unnecessary harm while still achieving important objectives. This ethical framework was not based on abstract philosophical principles but on practical recognition that sustainable success required sustainable methods. Marcus understood that a reputation for integrity was more valuable than any single transaction, that long-term relationships were more important than short-term advantages, and that building systems that benefited multiple parties was more powerful than winning zero-sum games. The dangerous man's ethics are therefore pragmatic rather than idealistic. He behaves ethically not primarily because he believes in abstract moral principles, but because he understands that ethical behavior serves his long-term interests more effectively than unethical shortcuts. He tells the truth because lies create complexity and dependency. He keeps his promises because reliability is a competitive advantage. He treats others fairly because unfairness generates opposition and resentment. This pragmatic approach to ethics does not make the dangerous man amoral or calculating in a negative sense. Rather, it aligns his moral intuitions with his strategic thinking, creating internal consistency between his values and his actions. He does not experience conflict between doing right and doing well because he has structured his life so that these objectives are compatible. Marcus's approach to business relationships exemplified this integration of ethics and effectiveness. He negotiated hard but fairly, seeking to create deals that provided genuine value for all parties rather than simply maximizing his own short-term gain. He disclosed risks and limitations honestly because he understood that surprises would damage relationships more than initial disappointments. He honored both the letter and spirit of his agreements because he valued his reputation more than any single advantage. This approach proved more effective than purely self-interested strategies would have been. Marcus's reputation for integrity attracted partners who might have been wary of working with someone known for sharp dealing. His honesty about limitations and risks actually increased others' confidence in his judgments about opportunities and advantages. His reliability in honoring agreements made others more willing to enter into complex, long-term arrangements that created more value than simple transactional relationships. As the dangerous man develops and demonstrates his capabilities over time, he faces the challenge of managing success without allowing it to recreate the weaknesses he worked to eliminate. Success brings its own temptations, the temptation to become complacent, to rest on past achievements, to believe one's own publicity. It can create new forms of dependency on reputation, lifestyle, or social position that mirror the dependencies the dangerous man originally overcame. Marcus encountered these challenges as his success grew. The financial rewards of his achievements created the possibility of a lifestyle that could become a golden cage. The recognition he received created pressure to maintain an image that might conflict with his authentic development. The opportunities that success brought required careful selection to avoid diluting his focus or overextending his capabilities. Marcus addressed these challenges by regularly returning to the fundamental principles that had driven his original transformation. He conducted periodic reviews of his goals, methods, and results, asking himself whether he was still operating from strength or had begun to drift toward comfort-seeking behaviors. He maintained practices that connected him with his original motivations and kept him grounded in reality rather than reputation. He also continued to seek out challenges that would require him to grow rather than simply apply existing capabilities. When his investment firm became successful enough that he could have managed it passively, Marcus chose instead to expand into new markets that would require him to develop new skills and relationships. When he achieved recognition as a thought leader in his industry, he used that platform to take on public policy challenges that were important but offered little immediate personal benefit. This commitment to continued growth and challenge served as a defense against the complacency that success can breed. By voluntarily seeking difficulty rather than avoiding it, Marcus ensured that he would continue developing rather than stagnating. By choosing challenges that aligned with his values rather than simply his interests, he maintained connection to purposes larger than personal advancement.
The dangerous man understands that his development is ultimately not about personal achievement but about capability for impact. The elimination of internal weakness and the development of external power are means to an end, the ability to create meaningful change in the world. The man who destroys his weak self does so not primarily for his own benefit but to become capable of benefits for others. This larger sense of purpose provides both motivation and guidance for the dangerous man's development. It helps him maintain perspective during difficult periods of growth and restraint during tempting periods of success. It ensures that his pursuit of power serves constructive rather than destructive ends. Most importantly, it provides meaning that transcends personal satisfaction or recognition. Marcus discovered this larger sense of purpose gradually as his capabilities developed. In his early career, he was motivated primarily by personal ambition and the desire to prove himself capable of more than others expected. As he achieved success, he began to recognize that his real satisfaction came not from the success itself but from the problems he could solve and the value he could create for others. This evolution in motivation led Marcus to take on increasingly challenging projects that had meaningful social benefits. He began investing in companies that were developing solutions to environmental problems, even when these investments were riskier than purely financial opportunities. He used his influence to promote policy changes that would benefit his industry as a whole rather than just his own firm. He mentored younger professionals not because he needed their admiration but because he could accelerate their development and multiply his positive impact. The dangerous man's ultimate victory is not over external enemies but over his own limitations. The man who destroys his weak self achieves freedom, not the adolescent freedom from responsibility, but the mature freedom for responsibility. He becomes free to choose based on his values rather than his fears, to act based on his judgment rather than others' approval, to pursue purposes larger than personal comfort or security. This freedom is both the goal and the reward of dangerous operation. It is what makes the difficult work of self-development worthwhile and what distinguishes the dangerous man from those who seek power for its own sake. The man who has achieved this freedom cannot be destroyed by others because he has already overcome the only enemy that ever truly threatened him, the weak self that would have kept him trapped in mediocrity. Marcus achieved this freedom through decades of disciplined effort, but he came to understand that the freedom itself was not an end point but a beginning. Having eliminated the internal obstacles to exceptional action, he was finally free to focus entirely on the external challenges and opportunities that mattered most. Having destroyed his weak self, he could finally become fully himself, not the self that sought comfort and approval, but the self that sought meaning and impact. The dangerous man, in the end, is dangerous not to innocent people or just institutions, but to complacency, mediocrity, and the settled assumptions that prevent positive change. He is dangerous to the status quo when the status quo serves no one well. He is dangerous to conventional wisdom when conventional wisdom has become conventional foolishness. He is dangerous to those who benefit from others' weakness and dependency. Most of all, the dangerous man is dangerous to the voice in every person that counsels against taking risks, against pursuing excellence, against believing that exceptional achievement is possible. His very existence is a rebuke to these voices. His success is proof that the path of disciplined self-development leads to genuine power and freedom. His example demonstrates that the man who destroys his weak self cannot be destroyed by others, and becomes capable of creating rather than merely consuming value in the world. This is why dangerous men are necessary, not because the world needs more powerful individuals, but because it needs more individuals powerful enough to solve its most challenging problems. The elimination of personal weakness and the development of exceptional capability are not luxury pursuits for the ambitious few, but essential preparations for those who would take responsibility for creating meaningful change. The world does not need more people who talk about what should be done. It needs more people who do what needs to be done. It needs more people who act while others debate, who lead while others follow, who take responsibility while others assign blame. It needs more dangerous men, not dangerous to the innocent, but dangerous to ignorance, incompetence, and the comfortable inaction that allows problems to persist and opportunities to be wasted. Marcus understood this as his life's work evolved from personal achievement to meaningful contribution. He recognized that his transformation from ordinary manager to dangerous operator was not complete until he used his capabilities to create changes that would outlast his own career. The ultimate test of dangerous operation is not personal success but positive impact that extends beyond the individual who achieved the capability to create it. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others because he has transcended the vulnerabilities that make destruction possible. Having conquered himself, he is free to focus on conquering the challenges that matter most. Having eliminated his dependencies, he is free to choose his commitments. Having overcome his limitations, he is free to attempt what others consider impossible. This is the true power of dangerous operation, not the ability to harm others, but the ability to help them. Not the capacity for destruction, but the capability for construction. Not freedom from responsibility, but freedom for responsibility. The dangerous man has eliminated his weak self not to become heartless, but to become capable of achievements that require both exceptional strength and unwavering purpose. In a world that often rewards weakness disguised as virtue and punishes strength mislabeled as vice, the dangerous man provides a necessary reminder that true virtue requires true strength, that meaningful change requires meaningful capability, and that the best service one can provide to others is to become powerful enough to actually help them rather than merely sympathize with their difficulties. The path of dangerous operation is not for everyone, nor should it be. It requires sacrifices that many would find unacceptable and disciplines that most would find unsustainable. But, for those who choose this path, who are willing to destroy their weak selves in order to become capable of exceptional contribution, it offers rewards that no external enemy can take away: the satisfaction of meaningful achievement, the freedom of personal independence, and the knowledge that one's life has made a positive difference in the world. This is why the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others, because he has achieved something more valuable than any external possession or position. He has achieved himself, not the self he was born to be, but the self he chose to become through disciplined effort and unwavering commitment to growth. Having created himself through conscious choice rather than unconscious drift, he cannot be uncreated by others' actions or opposition. The dangerous man stands as proof that human potential is not fixed, that circumstances are not destiny, that the weak self can indeed be destroyed and replaced with something stronger, more capable, and more worthy of the precious gift of human life. In a world that often seems to reward mediocrity and punish excellence, the dangerous man demonstrates that excellence remains possible for those willing to pay its price and that the price, however high, is worth paying for those who understand what such payment makes possible. Marcus's story, in the end, is not unique in its particulars but in its demonstration of universal principles. Every dangerous man follows his own path, faces his own challenges, and achieves his own version of success. But all dangerous men share the fundamental commitment to destroying their weak selves and becoming capable of achievements that seemed impossible when they began their journeys of transformation. The weak self never surrenders willingly, but it can be defeated through patient, persistent, intelligent effort. The man who achieves this victory gains something more valuable than any external treasure. He gains himself, freed from the limitations that once bound him and capable of contributions that his former self could never have imagined. Having paid the price of self-transformation, he becomes truly dangerous not to the innocent, but to the forces of mediocrity, complacency, and despair that keep too many people trapped in lives smaller than their potential would allow. This is the ultimate message of dangerous operation: that human potential is vast, that personal transformation is possible, and that the man who destroys his weak self becomes not only indestructible by others but capable of helping others discover and develop their own dangerous potential. In a world that desperately needs more people capable of meaningful positive change, the dangerous man provides both example and hope: example that such transformation is possible, and hope that those who achieve it will use their capabilities wisely and well.